Welcome back to The Independence. Have you been curious about lifting marijuana prohibition and how it might affect Mexican suppliers who have profited off of Americans' weed habits? Legalization proponents have long cited simple laws of supply and demand in projecting the effects of diminishing returns for violent drug cartels. Marijuana is only freshly legal in Colorado and Washington state, but could the shift in supply already be taking its toll? Let's talk to Ron Paul. He's a former congressman and host of the Ron Paul Channel. Welcome back, Dr. Paul.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Very good. So we're hearing some grumbling south of the border. Is it too soon to know if altering prohibition is having an effect in Mexico?
I think it probably is a little bit early because, the change in the laws, you never know what the unintended consequences will be, especially if there's a lot of high taxes placed on it. And that's how they started regulating marijuana in 1937, was put a high tax on it, and then it became prohibition. So it depends on what they do. And this argument, well, this is great, and I do think it's great that there's nullification of so many of these laws, and the feds are inept at, pursuing this. But, I just think that we're so much better off, without these laws, and it's going to be much better. But the argument that we want to do it because the states can put taxes on it, that doesn't have much appeal to me. Of course, it's still better than the prohibition. I mean, we got rid of prohibition of alcohol, and they do tax alcohol, so it's not the end of the world, but it still is a burden. Of course, if you had a libertarian society, you wouldn't be legalizing something just so you could tax it. So that's not a very appealing argument for me.
Dr. Paul, you have long followed foreign policy in this country. Can you talk a little bit about the way that the drug war has warped or shaped foreign policy in your view?
Yeah, I would think that probably one of the significant events that I recall in the 1980s was the Iran-Contra affair, because the CIA was involved and they were trading and financing some of that illegally with the drug war. But, all you have to do is look at the chaos in Afghanistan. That's involved with drugs, too. And sometimes we were over there wanting to stop, the use of drugs and have this prohibition. At the same time, we were allies with some of the same people that were making money off it. So I think I don't think that's the major issue in foreign policy, but it certainly plays a significant role.
You were one of the first GOP candidates I've ever seen at a Republican debate to talk openly about legalizing heroin, which is one of my favorite moments in modern American political history. When are any Republicans, particularly any whose name rhyme with, Grand Fall, going to get out in front of legalization in the same way that people like Jared Polis and Beto O'Rourke are doing on the Democratic side?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I know it's difficult. It isn't so much that the individuals I talked to and worked with in Washington didn't have sympathetic. I mean, they weren't behind the scenes. They weren't, yelling and screaming at me for destroying the world because I had this position on drugs. But they still perceive that it's a risky political position to take. And I thought that one of the types of achievements I had was running in a southern district, a Bible Belt district, and promoted getting rid of the drug war, and never hurting me having run against Democrats and Republicans that used that as the big issue. When I was trying to come back into the Congress in 1996, I mean, that was the very big issue. And the fact that it never was an issue, both sides spent a lot of money, $1 million each, to try to keep me from coming back. Using that means the people are way ahead of it. But in Washington, they're usually about 10 or 20 years behind, because I'm not sure they've quite comprehended what's going on today with how the states at the local level have achieved essentially nullification. So I think it's a great issue to talk about. And the other reason I liked it is the people that I did work with, like Barney Frank, on the drug issue in Washington. It brings progressives together. It's a good issue for libertarians, where they can talk to liberals and they can talk to constitutionalists. And we're making progress, but the average conservative Republican, it's a little bit too risky even now, and there
are people inside the government who are certainly not interested in ending the war on drugs. I saw one categorization of the DEA that they don't want to lose their budget and their toys, and they've got a very curious relationship with the Sinaloa cartel, specifically in Mexico. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, I don't know too much about that, but one important reason too that they have trouble with this is if something is legalized, they believe if you legalize liberty of choices, then you've endorsed it. You know, there's a lot of things. Matter of fact, I'm probably the least likely person ever in the Congress ever to have seen. I've never seen anybody or been around marijuana, yet I was leading the charge for that. But most of them think that if you talk about legalization, that means you've endorsed these issues. But that's sort of like legalizing freedom of speech, that you endorse everything that goes out under freedom of speech. You legalize the choice in religion, that means you endorse religion. But as soon as it comes to habits, well, and the conservatives get all worked up. Sometimes I'm sure that's an excuse. Other times, you know, I hear the argument a whole lot. Well, you know, if I vote for that, that's a bad sign, you know, and I'm endorsing that, which is absolutely not true.
All right, Dr. Paul, thank you very much.
Welcome.
All right, what's wrong with feeding the homeless some hot meals made with love? I think it's great, but I'm not the police department who fined a couple thousands of dollars for helping out some people in need.